Can you hear me? Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Everybody here? No? Yes? Raise your hand if you're not here. All right, we hope you had a great lunch. We're going to continue. And for those who are watching online, we hear your questions. So just write them on the comments and we'll answer them as we go.
And also for those that have other questions that have not been addressed, Adilson has paper and pen there. So just write the questions, put them on the box, and we'll get to them by the end of the day. Oh, where's our script? Well, I will go off script because this is a dear friend from Boston, Flavio Zanetti, whom we're honored and so glad that he's able to join us for this topic, sexuality and youth. The lecture will be in English, so there won't be any Portuguese translation. It is our hope that all of you speak the language. So without further ado, let us all extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to our brother, Flavio Zanetti.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Much better. I do know that I have a very challenging task, which is to keep you all awake after lunch. So I'm going to do my best, right? And there's a special device in my pocket that if you sleep, that device is going to go towards you. So be careful. So folks, it's with my heart full of joy and full of gratitude that I accepted this invitation from very dear friends, yourselves, that are putting together this amazing event. So allow me to start by saying thank you for the opportunity. And also, once again, let's put our hands to everybody that collaborated to this. Thank you so much. I'm sure, for those of you who could see the spirituality right now, you'll be amazed to see how much goes on that our eyes cannot see. So let's start. Allow me to show you this girl. Her name is Lila Alcorn. Does anybody know her? Okay. Lila Alcorn was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Lila Alcorn was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the Midwest of the United States of America. In a town or in a state that really likes to call themselves conservative and with a lot of rigor when it comes to education and things like that. Unfortunately for Lila, she did not see or did not have at home the things that mattered the most for her. She was actually able to find some of these in the school with her friends, with her neighbors, with her best friend that lived right across from her, but in her own house, she was not able to find support, help, assistance, empathy, or really love from her parents. And folks, we're not judging, we're just showing you what happened to Lila, because at the age of 17, she could not do that anymore. And she decided, tragically, to end her life. The reason why I wanted to start by saying this, or by showing you or bringing you this topic or this example, is because this is an adolescent, a teenager, a trans teenager, who was going through a lot of turmoil inside of her, that at the very most foundational institution, which is our families, right? She was not able to find the support that she needed. So I want you to keep Lila's topic as we go through this journey for the next 45, 50 minutes. And because that may help you uncover some of the things that we'll be touching. And hopefully, this will serve as an invitation for you to go home, keep reading about the topic, keep getting more knowledge about it, and hopefully helping someone like Lila you may run into one day in your lives. So, sexuality. I'm a big fan of looking words in the dictionary. My grandma used to say, my son, if you don't know something, just look it up, right? Back in the days, those huge books, right, that you need to go and look, but right now it's a lot easier because guess what? There is internet, this thing called internet. So sexuality is the quality or state of being sexual. All of us, right? This is right there. You all know what sexuality is, right? From the material point of view. If we look at sexuality from the condition of having sex, I'd like to believe that all of us here have already had sex in our lives, maybe once or twice, right? Before. And if we delve into a little bit of psychology, right? If you look at how Freud described this very complex psychological development process that he puts into stages that really describes how psychosexual, human beings are, right? And these range from when we're born all the way up to when we become adults, right? Hey, can I ask you a favor? Can you change the, to show presenter notes? Sorry, real quick.
Do you know how to do it? I don't know how to do it.
Presenter notes. Oh, I know, right? You need to separate display. Sorry, guys. Voila. All right, coming back. So, if you look at how Freud described that, again, I'm not a psychologist. If you have questions, Marlon, I'm sure will be able to answer these questions for you. But if you look from the psychological point of view, that's how Freud described our stages into developing towards sexuality. Still in psychology, and this is something that I'm sure you may have seen it or may have heard about it, right? It's called the Pyramid of Needs from Abraham Maslow. And if you look into this pyramid of needs, right? Starts from the bottom, which is we all need to breathe, we all need food. The lunch was great, right? Yeah. Great lunch. Thank you, cooks or chefs or folks that prepared the food for us. It was amazing. So we all need these things for our lives. And as we really grow towards self-actualization, really becoming very fulfilled, human beings, we need these things. Allow me to call out two important ones that you may have seen here, but I'm going to make it easy for you, right? As I tell my wife, honey, I don't really understand smoke signals, right? I like big, purple, blinking letters that I can read. So I'm going to make it easy on you guys. I know it's after lunch, you're all tired, you eat a lot, but what fat people do, it's okay. So if you look at physiologically speaking, we all have a need to sex. It's right there, right? That's what psychology tells us, right? But not only that, if you look in the third pyramid, we all have a need of sexual intimacy, right? So it's right there. All of us progress towards that direction, right? And of course, after that, self-esteem and morality and, really understanding of self-actualization, becoming fulfilled, human beings. But, okay, Flavio, it's great, but this is all psychology? This is a psychology lecture? No, it's not. So let's talk about adolescence for a little bit. Because the topic, as you may remember, it's sexuality and youth. So for us to understand youth, it's important to understand what happens through the adolescence years. I know for some of you might still be very fresh By some of us, it's been maybe a couple of decades ago, but I won't get into that. So if you look at the adolescent development, this is in a nutshell what happens. We all have these needs, we all have these conditions when we become or we are teenagers, that we need this emotional, right, support. We need physical capabilities, social. That's why, you may remember when you were teenagers, you loved to hang out in groups. You were part of several different groups. You had your gang, your crew, your folks that you hung out with. And of course, the cognitive part of it, that we all need to really understand life and start developing our goals and our needs and our North Star when it comes to developing our cognitive capabilities. But if you take a paragraph or you compare this with what Spiritism talks to us about, right? John of the Evangelist tells us that adolescence is when the spirit is completing the incarnation. All the aspects of that incarnation are being formed, are being built in a way that that individual is able to really continue, right, his or her own life towards the future. It's a time for new experiences, new behaviors. You learn new things to become a professional in whatnot, or to do other things. You learn new capabilities, right? It's the time that our cognitive minds and brains are really getting more knowledge, right? It's also that phase that you're no longer a child and you're neither an adult. And guess what? A lot of conflict happens. A lot of sometimes anxiety, a lot of uncertainties and insecurities. All these things happen, right, in our lives. I know you may not remember these things, but when we were teenagers, that happens quite a bit. And last but not least, right, a huge lab of hormones. I mean, all these, windmill or mill of hormones that's really driving sometimes what we do with our lives, how we act, how we behave, how we see the world, how we read everything that happens to us, right? And of course, sexual activity towards pleasure starts to happen again. The piece that's important to know here is that it's a time for transition. And in that transition, sexuality plays a huge, huge part. Right? So, into more details, to make it a little easier for you guys, right? So, look at this from one big picture. All these beautiful teenagers, right? The idea of sexual development, the idea that they're starting to date, right? They're starting to really feel attracted to other people. They're starting to really feel this energy contemplation, that they want to be part of something greater in life, right? Their physical hormones, as we mentioned, starts to develop. They start exchanging the psychic hormones as well, right? They spend time and time talking to people, getting to know them, and learning from them and whatnot. It's really important. But at the same time, adolescents, teenagers, we needed a lot of encouragement. We needed a lot of validation for the things that were happening to us. Now, let me ask you this. Let's go back to your adolescence years. Did you find a lot of encouragement? Did you find a lot of validation? Did you find a lot of support? Did you find a lot of empathy from your parents, friends, school, society in general? Did you find all these things in your life? Please don't answer. We don't want to get into more details. But the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that oftentimes adolescents don't see that, don't face that. And the question that I have for you is, how can Spiritism help? Is there something in Spiritism that we can apply to teenagers so they can see their lives with different angles, with different eyes, with different colors? I believe we do. And my hope is that when this is over, you all leave this room with that mindset as well. So let's review some Spiritist concepts, okay? Because after all, this is a Spiritist lecture, so we need to really bring Spiritist concepts. So, do you think that spirits influence your lives? Raise your hand if you think yes. So raise your hand if you think not. So if you're sleeping, raise your hand because I'm actually missing some hands. This is the time that it has to be, just kidding. Of course they do. They do, and quite a bit, to be honest, right? Kardec asked that same question to the spirits, and the immortal beings came back to us and told us their influence upon us is much greater than you can even imagine. They are often the ones that guide you. So if they're the ones that offer guidance, adults, what happens when we are teenagers? Even higher influence, right? So it's that, hey, should I cheat on my wife? No, yeah, right? That kind of, angel and demon kind of thing. But that's our reality. I know this is a cartoon here, but that's the reality that we face every day, right? Spirits are here with us, and they're trying to influence. And sometimes we open these doors here, other times we open those doors there, right? The quality of the door that we open, it's all about us, right? It's all dependent upon our own choices. What we, really pray and believe and think about life. But they're there all the time, trying to influence us, right? We can't deny that. We can't deny that. So more concepts. There is, in the Spirits book, Roberto mentioned this in the beginning, right? I'm going to mention it again because guess what? This time it's in English. And there's a little difference in translation from the English with the Portuguese version. So, question 200 of the Spirits book, Allan Kardec asked the immortal spirits, are spirits male or female? Simple as that. What about spirits? By the way, this is capital S, so meaning spirits that are not on earth. Are they male or female? And by the way, once again, this question was very interesting because at the time, the world was not as we live today, right? Men were right here, women were below this podium, right? All the way down, maybe in the first floor or the basement or something. That was the way society used to play. I know we're not even there, we're not there yet. We still live in a patriarchal, society that really gives a lot of, privileges, unearned privileges to, men, and I'd say even heterosexual men and whatnot. But it's important to know that when Kardec asked that question in 1857, right, the society was very different. And I invite you to go back in time and think how it was when you read that question over 160 years ago. The spirits were very eloquent when they said, not as you understand it, right? Because sex depends on organic composition. So organically speaking is different than we're used to seeing, but yes, they do, right? They are in that sort of scenario. And he goes even beyond to say more things, which goes, love and sympathy, or affinity, right, exist amongst spirits, but they are based on affinity of sentiments instead. So the more connected you are with somebody, right, that's what calls out the relationships, the affections, the emotions that you feel with that individual, right? Not so much so as we see and learn and understand from our concept of this day and age. Continuing, the very next question, right, he touches into a little more specific about male and female, and he asks, can a spirit who has animated the body of a man animate after the body of a woman into a new existence, and vice versa, right? So, again, when you look at this question, to me it was dumbfounding. Then he said, it's like, today you have a life that's right here, and then tomorrow can you go back all the way, right? So, it was really eye-opening for a lot of people when you asked that question. Because society didn't really talk about these terms back then. Oh, we don't know right now. You imagine back then, right? So all these topics were considered big taboo, based on society, based on the Judeo-Christian philosophies and mindset of the time. But nevertheless, he'll go and ask these questions. And the spirits say, yes. Yeah, absolutely, right? It's the very same spirit that can be today a man, right, that's associated with the body of a man, and then of course, in a gender as a man, tomorrow as a woman, and so forth, right? We go back and forth, right? There's no specific rule that you have to be here, X amount of incarnations, no, right? That's what the spirits are telling Kardec. But they don't stop there. They continue saying that spirits can go there, but since they must progress in every way, in each sex. I'll give an example. My fellow biological man here in the audience, right? It's going to be impossible for us to feel what it is to give birth. In this life, I'm sorry, we will not be able to have that feeling, right? What it is to be a co-creator, to help, right, the universe by delivering a baby. There's no way for us to do that, right? I mean, women are the ones that have this in this life, in their conditions as females, right? Those that decide and have kids will be able to really feel and go through that experience. For us, right? We can't even. There's no way for us. We can read about it. We can try to empathize it, but it's not going to be the same. It's impossible. But don't worry. There is one task, one activity that we guys, right, have a way to do that our spouses, wives, or friends won't be able to do. And I'll tell you why. So when you go home, you open the refrigerator door, right? When you open the refrigerator door, there's this big jar of pickle, right? And the ability of women to open that big jar of pickle, it's impossible. In this life, women, sorry, you guys cannot do that, right? And then my father-in-law comes in, hey, my son, I brought you this tool. They just pop the jar lid and opens very easily. I said, you just, destroy my whole. So jokes aside, what I'm trying to say here, guys, is our incarnation depends on the types of trials, types of learning opportunities that we have. And sometimes we have in this way, other times that way, sometimes in this concept, in this dynamic, in this kind of body, in that kind of body. Each one of these experiences allow us or give us opportunities to grow. Give us opportunities to learn, to further develop, and to make ourselves better. That's what spirits are telling Kardec, right? We acquire new experiences based on different dynamics of our lives. All right, we touched on that. So what about sex? We heard in the morning. Can we say anything that haven't been said about sex that's important to be said? And there's a phrase that I like to bring from the book Action and Reaction that Andrew Lewis talks about sex as the source of divine creation. Everything and anything you want to create. And I'm not talking about a baby, a reproduction. No, I'm talking about any new project, any new thing you want to build, any new activity, any new engagement, any new effort that you're trying to do, right? The sexual energy is behind that. It's the force that helps us. It's this energy that helps us be creative in a way, right? That's what Andrew Lewis talks about. So it's really important for us to remove, right, the definition or the explanation that sex should and only be used for a reproduction basis, which is not, right? We learned that in the morning. I'm not going to get there, again. If we forward to Emmanuel in his book Life and Sex, he has a paragraph that I think it's the utmost importance. Because this paragraph talks about when two people establish a union, establish a partnership, right? And he says, when two people establish the sexual communion, a marriage, a partnership, right? A union, however you want to call it, right? An energy circuit begins. And I think Roberto touched a little bit about before, right? That circle of energy begins, and they feed from each other, right? They connect to each other. However, Emmanuel goes into more depth by explaining to us, if one ends up injuring the other, based on certain behavior, based on not sustaining their own responsibilities, right? They break their emotional balance. Hey, Flavio, are you saying that Spiritism is against? No, I'm not saying that. Actually, Spiritism is not against anything else. We are not here to create a behavioral system. No, we're not. We're here to help through literature, through materials, to give us more ideas, or to really open our minds, to bring peace to our hearts in a way that Christ gave us the message that unfortunately got somewhat corrupted along the way. Let's go back to Leela's example. In Leela's example, if you remember, right, her parents called themselves Christians. Her parents did not believe, right, that the girl that they had in their lives, in their family, in their house, was worthwhile living. Because they believed that what she was going through right, was against what Christ taught us. But let me ask you this instead. Didn't Jesus himself say to all of us, bring me the meek, the humble, the afflicted, the anxious, all those that need help. Bring them to me, and I'll give them, right? Redemption. He didn't say, bring me those that go to church every Sunday morning, those that... No, he didn't say that. Bring me those... No. It's really important, guys, that we demystify the idea of Christianity as something that prohibits a lot of things. To me, this is the point that hits home about Spiritism. It's this body of knowledge that goes beyond what has been told before. They're really disciples that peels the onion, right? Layer by layer of all these important messages that Jesus, our main teacher, has given to us. But based on society, based on human beings, translating the message got corrupted along the way. To me, if Jesus is not here as our teacher, as our Lord in a way that we look up to him, right? As I used to call, to me, he's my compass. Then my wife says, you're so old. Nobody has a compass anymore. Can you change that? Maybe. So let's change it. To me, he's my GPS. When I want to come here, I go in my car's dash and then put the address and tells me, turn left, turn right. Guess what? If I don't want to turn left, I can go straight, I can go left, I can go forward, right? Maybe it's a longer way. And if I keep saying no and no and no, maybe I'm going to New York and ended up in Philadelphia. Or maybe I'm coming from Boston to New York and ended up in Cincinnati, Ohio, Lila's hometown. But if I follow those directions, in 3.5, 4 hours, I'm here. To me, that's Christianity. That's Spiritism. In a way that when we look at the gospel, when you look at the teachings, they hit home to us. They say, you can be whatever you are, whatever you want. But be careful, because if you do these things, if you disappoint your partner, if you betray your partner, if you do this, if you do that, there will be some consequences. He's not saying don't do this or do that in a way that it's prohibiting us. On the contrary, Spiritism only tells us that for every action, there's a reaction. And every time we act, that we bring conflict, we bring injury to our fellow neighbor, the world's very just, right? We need to repent. We need to repair. We need to fix. We need to do that again. We need to really bring that back. So in this concept, that to me is the beauty of Spiritism. It's the beauty of it. Because it's not something that's 100% set in stone. You can change it. Well, let alone Kardec said, if science goes left and we are right, stick with science. I'm going to repeat that. Kardec said, if science goes left and if we go right, stick with science. And as we learn, a lot of things called scientific development has happened along the LGBTQ movement, as we know, right? Is it perfect? Oh, by all means. There's a lot of work to be done. But it's getting there. I mean, it's much better than in 1857, for sure. So, in this mindset, when we look at what Spiritism tells us or teaches us, it really goes back to the revived Christ, in my humble opinion. When we look at that, when we study, when we open the books, when we get familiar with the idea, with this body of knowledge that's constantly progressing, that's constantly changing and bringing new knowledge, new concepts, incorporating them, to me that's beautiful, that's marvelous. Because it is a guideline for me to think and put that into practice in my life. It doesn't tell me, do this, do that. It tells me, if you do this, that's going to happen to you. If you do that, that's the consequence, and so forth. So, let me take a different approach here. Let me ask you this. Are you prejudiced? Raise your hand if you're prejudiced. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's only 10%. So for those of you who did not raise your hand, I'd like for you to think about this. When I show you this picture, be honest, let's all be honest here. When I show you this picture, I'd like for you to think the first word that comes to your mind. Are you ready? And by the way, This is from my alma mater, Harvard, the Implicit Project. We did a project with 2,000 students from different colleges, right, through all the campuses, to really understand if they were prejudiced. So, what comes to your mind? Love it. Love it. Unfortunately, that's not what comes to mind to most people, right? Friends, fun, right? Beautiful couple, right? It's a gay couple, right? I was giving a lecture almost as close to this in a different part of the country, and I showed this picture. I got 2 guys in the back room just left the room. This was a topic for teenagers. They just left, right? So it happens because we are prejudiced. And I'm not saying we're prejudiced, no, it's everything, because it's in the air we breathe. We all are. And if you say you're not, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Oh, but I have a brother. Yes, you may. But because it's in the air we breathe, we're still prejudiced. We're still, most of us are still racist a little bit, classist, sexist, and all these prejudices. Because our society is such. And as we live in that society, right, there's no other way. Unless you live in a bubble, that you don't talk to anybody, you're just by yourself, then you can't say you're not prejudiced. So in this Harvard implicit study, they found out that 98% of the students in one of the most prestigious universities in the world are, guess what? Prejudiced. In different ways, shapes, or forms. Might not be in this particular way, or in that particular way, but we all are, folks. But the good thing is, we have to understand our prejudices. Because if you go to the doctor asks you, are you sick? You say, no. What is he or she going to do? Go home then, right? So if you go to the doctor and say, are you sick? Hey, doctor, I have a little thing here that I need to really, let's take a look. And that. So if you don't acknowledge that there are a lot of prejudices still, you're never going to work on them. People are going to talk to you about these things, you're just going to put them aside, and that's not going to do you any good. And if you truly want to follow Christ, because I believe you do, we are, right? We're all here already. We could be doing a lot of other great things in the city. It's a beautiful day outside, but we have decided to be here, watch this fat, sweaty guy talk for 55 minutes, right? What does that mean? It means I see this. I put this as a priority for my life. And if you truly believe so, we got to move beyond it. Right? We got to acknowledge our prejudices. We got to work on them. And guess what? All of us have prejudices in different ways, shapes, or forms. Okay? So much so that this fine gentleman, Dr. William James, one of the greatest researchers of all times, the father of psychology, right? Harvard dean for many, many years, right? Studied spiritualism back in the days. Said a great many people, a lot of people, think they are thinking. But in reality, they're merely rearranging their prejudices. They're finding boxes to put them in different parts of their brains. Folks, it's 2019, for Christ's sake. It's a time for us to do better. We can do better. And Spiritism can help us do better. If you're really willing to change yourself, if you're really willing to become a better person, it's time to do better. And guess what? You are able to do better. Because Christ himself said, the load is never bigger than one can carry. If you're feeling down, if you're feeling that a lot of people don't like you, the way you look, the way you talk, the way you are as a person, right? Whatever it is that you're going through, you can be better than that. You can find support. You can see things from a different perspective. Spiritism opens our eyes for other angles that before they were not there. Right? Before they were not there. Let me tell you a secret. You want to hear a secret? very important secret. Very important secret. So, a lot of the conflicts that we have in our lives, right? A lot of them, both personally and collectively, right? They originate in the way we misbehave sexually. The way that we use sex to torment others. The way that we use sex to really bring a lot of affliction towards others. The way that we don't understand the concepts of it. We ended up doing things that are not the best for us and for our neighbors, right? So when we look at these things, right? Sometimes they're masked in a way that's not wrong. It's just the way it is, right? If I'm famous, right? I'm a guy, I'm a heterosexual guy, there's 25,000 women who want to have sex with me, right? What's wrong with that? Well, guys, we mask in a way that we don't comprehend. That's why Spiritism gives us that different types of lenses to look at that environment. It tells us, it teaches us these special nuances about sexuality, about sexual instinct, about the proper use, right, of our sexual abilities, in a way that we're collaborating with God. And I know this topic is not very commonly seen or talked or even broached in the Spiritist mindset, but it's important. Because as we learn today, right, sexuality is in everything that we do. It's everywhere. In the plants, right? In the animals. It's everywhere. So in a way for us to understand, comprehend, and properly use our sexuality towards our own greater good, towards the greater good to our others, our friends, our family members, it changes. It changes how we see it. It changes how we put that into practice. And it also changes how others see us. Instead of eventually, right, leading to criminal, aggressive behaviors that we see all the time. It is really a different mindset. Okay, Flavio, but you know what? I'm a great guy, I'm a great woman, I'm this and that, and I live a very decent life, and why do I have to pay attention to this? Right? Why are you telling me this? Because from what I'm saying, everything seems fine. Right? Guess what? Andrew Lewis said that all of us individuals, have either fallen before, or we can still fall when it comes to sex matters. And if we haven't fallen, it will be a matter of time. So for us to avoid that, or try to avoid it, it's important that we learn, we gain that knowledge, we really better educate ourselves in a way that a student studies before he or she takes a test, right? That's what it is. So what do? We go back to study, we read, we talk to people, we come across different situations, we understand what's in it for us, what we have to do, right? What we cannot do, what we should not do, and all these things. And then we put this concept of this, map in our heads, right? How we should act in our lives. Understanding our own prejudices, understanding that we are immortal beings, understanding that we are spirits, that as we learned already today, could be in this incarnation as a male, next incarnation as female, this incarnation with one scenario, one concept, one dynamic, in the next incarnation with a different one. And guess what? That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Because each one of these are going to give us different teaching moments. So let me ask you another question. So imagine you go home and you turn the television on, right? This is not cable, so it's public television. Then you get a movie. Maybe that movie is after the third commercial, so to speak, right? Can you understand the whole movie if you grab that by the half of it? Can you?
No.
This is the time you're supposed to participate in the conversation, right?
No.
So I'm waiting for participation. So very difficult, right? For you to get the gist of the movie entirely. That's like us, right? So when we look at ourselves in this life, some of us with 40 years old, some of us with 27 years old, right? So when we look at that, we can only see a little bit. We have an idea. Same way as we have an idea with our movies. Maybe it's a thriller. Maybe it's a crime movie. Maybe it's a, drama. Maybe it's a horror movie. And you have an idea of the type of movie that we're watching. Of course, we're going to watch until the end, so it's, right? We get it. But when you look at our lives, it's impossible to understand every little single thing that we've been through. As a matter of fact, it's a blessing that God does not allow us to know every single little thing that we do or we've done in the past. Right? One example, to make it a little more easier, the purple blinking lights, right? As I said before. So imagine if in my previous life I had killed my dear friend Fred. We had a beef and then I couldn't really deal with that anymore. I just shot him, killed him, whatever. Then we were in this incarnation and I have this, sense of guilt for what I've done to Fred. What am I going to do? I know I have to repair that. I'm going to do everything I can to please him, to help him, and to assist him, and to be the best friend possible. That Fred can rely on Flavio for everything, right? Even our names, F and F, and it's great, right? Amazing. How truth is that? How truthful is that going to be? It's not from here. It is not from here. I'm doing something that, I'm going to help him. That's not what God wants us to do. Right? He wants us to really love each other, to be friends, to be fraternal with each other, to really live, right, as we're a big family. And by the way, raise your hand if there's no one in your family that's a problem. Raise your hand. Nobody, right? Now raise your hand if you are the problem. That's more difficult. So see a couple hands. Okay, that's exactly what happens, right? So there are some difficulties. There are some challenges that sometimes in a family setting, right, they will be more visible. So in a way that we don't know of them in the past, it's important for us to understand that sex, right, or improper use of sex have caused us a lot of atonement, have caused us a lot of affliction, have caused us a lot of traumatic experiences in the past. But the beauty, again, of Spiritism is that it teaches us that, yes, that's possible. But if the moment you change, as Jesus said himself, right? Love covers a mountain of sin. So the moment we change our mindset, the moment we look into the life with different eyes, the moment we put different North Star, the moment the gospel becomes our GPS, the moment that happens, we transition. We change as human beings. The old Flavio is no longer here. The new Flavio starts to come up. Right? Because the movie continues. And guess what? All of our movies are going to have a happy ending. Meaning a very happy, final of it. Right? So, again, what I'm trying to suggest is that we live in this journey. And it's important to understand where we are in this journey. Right? It's really important to understand what we've done, sort of, in the past, and the role that sex, or the improper use of sex, plays and played in it. Alright? So, wrapping it up. Let me see if I can do something very, very revolutionary here. No, not yet. It's a couple more. So, you've seen this before, but I'm going to repeat because those are very important topics that Emmanuel wrote for us in 1960, right? He said, do not prohibit sex, because if you do, it's not going to take you anywhere. But instead, proper education. What's the role of it? Why we should do it? Why we should pay attention? Be careful, all these things, right? He said it to us, right? If you look at, don't impose abstinence, you shouldn't do this, in a way that Leela's parent told her, right? You can never have sex with a boy. That's against God's law, right? Because in the Old Testament, but that's the Judeo, view of it. That's 3,000 years old, right? So let's move away from that. Because Christ didn't say these things to us, right? So when we do that, we become more respectful, not only to others, but also to ourselves. That's what Emmanuel is telling us. So don't be indisciplined with it, but try to control it. And if you have some, temptations, work on them. It might be something you can really see a professional about it. Maybe something that you can maybe go to the Spiritist Center for a treatment, or both, right? There are options for us to continue progressing in the mindset. The movie, right? Think of that movie analogy. We're continuing with the movie, which is the story of our lives, right? And Emmanuel wraps it up with saying, no to free impulses, but rather responsibility. Because we're all responsible for every single little thing that we do. I'll tell you another story that's funny. I hope it's funny. If not, just laughing at this, because that's pretty fine. That's totally fine. So the story was like this. There was a guy that came to visit our center in Boston, and he was there once in a while. His name was Ronnie, and he was a great guy. And all of a sudden, hey, Ronnie, never saw Ronnie anymore. Right? Then I go and do some other lectures across the country, and I said, Ronnie, sitting in the front chair, and I said, that guy's Ronnie. What is he doing here? So, anyways, finished the talk and ended up going to talk to Ronnie, right? But Ronnie's no longer there. So, what happened, Ronnie? I mean, come on, right? I felt a little sad because I've known him for many, many years and just left. I mean, truth behold, he was behind the scenes doing some work on the food, and really, he became a worker in that Spiritist center, which was amazing to see that, right? And I said, Ronnie, just talk to me, right? Because when we were, going together, you never really, what happened? He goes, Flavio, I'll tell you this. The two most important things that I learned from Spiritism, I'll tell you right now. Sure, I'd love to hear, right? Because that's me trying to understand how people really grab the idea, right? As you can tell, I'm not sure if you could already or not, I'm very passionate about this, right? So Ronnie said, Flavio, the best thing that happened to me about Spiritism is this. Oh, right, go. Everything that I do, right? Everything that happens to me, it's my responsibility. All the great things that happen to me, I'm responsible. So yeah, it's action, reaction, cause and effect again. Right? And every quote-unquote bad thing that happens to me, I'm also responsible. Because nothing happens by accident, by mistake. Listen, I get it, it's good. I like it, good. Then, okay, so this is the best part. What's the other part that you say? So the other part is this. Every good thing that happens to me, I'm responsible. And every quote-unquote bad thing that happens to me, I'm also responsible. And I said, Ron, now you're confusing me, because you said the same answer, good and bad. I said, Flavio, I'll tell you why. Because when I was starting with Spiritism, I was very depressed. I was very depressed because the way I've always been treated in the life, right, in the world, in my society, right? This is a black guy, African-American, born and raised in Boston, right? And I said, Ronnie, but what are you talking about? I can't empathize, because guess what? In this life, I'm not black, so I know what happens. I know that black people have different, I know that from a theoretical perspective, right? Jim Crow, Martin Luther King, I know that, I read it, but I would never be able to really see from your lens. So help me out. He said, I put a lot of responsibility in my parents, in the neighborhood that I grew up, external responsibilities, right? Spiritism teaches me that I'm also responsible for some of these things. May not in this life, but in a previous one. I said, I love it, right? In the same way that I don't look for blame anymore, I look for ways to, if somebody does something to me that I don't like, guess what? I move on. Before I'll be disgruntled, before I'll be enraged, and I'll try to do something about it, right now, I just don't anymore. So that's the same way that if we are oppressed in any way, if we're feeling something that somebody's telling us, look at it from a different way, right? Look at it from an angle that that's an opportunity for me to forgive somebody. At very least, that's an opportunity for you to forgive something. It's not easy. It's not cookie cutter, right? It takes a lot of courage to do that, but that's the invitation. That's what Christ is inviting us to do every single day. Because guess what? All of us are going to face situations where, right, people are not going to say things that we like. So, going back to the main topic about youth, right? So if you have a son or a daughter that is in their teenager years, or if you have a niece or a nephew, or if you have a neighbor or a friend or anybody that is adolescents and you need some help, right? Allow me to give you 10 tips for talking with youth, right, about healthy sexuality, right? Again, for me, Spiritism is very practical, right? If I cannot apply this in my daily life, right, it doesn't work for me. So I gotta find ways to really be practical about it. And these are some of them. So, when talking to teenagers, first of all, be real. I mean, just be real and be accurate, right? So be real and be accurate. In a way that don't try to create some story, no. Because in this day and age, right, they have access to a lot of information. They can pull their, smartphones sometimes, they can put their computers and do a lot of research by themselves, right? Be real, be real. Son or daughter, I don't know this. Let's go and ask some people. Let's go and talk to somebody, or Joe, or Mary, or whatever, whoever it is. Let's go to the library and find some books. See how old I am? Nobody goes to the library anymore. So let's go this and that. So try to find a way that you're real with them. Don't pretend, right? Do a homework. Because sometimes they come to talk to you with more knowledge than you do. As a parent, as an uncle, as an aunt, right? So it's really important. Be open. Why do I say be open? Because a lot of us were not given proper sexuality studies in our day and age, right? A lot of things were given under the table and this and that, right? Because as parents, God bless them, they were even in a much harder shape back in their generations. So be open about it. Be open that your son or daughter may tell you something that, I don't know about this. Let me do some research. I'll get back to you on it. Let me talk to some people. Let me be real with you, right? I'd love to help you. Let's walk together on this. But guess what, son or daughter? I don't have the answers. I just don't, right? I don't. Ask away. We talked about that already. Be relevant. Meaning, you can't talk to a 12-year-old the same way you talk to a 17-year-old, right? Be mindful of their age, of their knowledge already, of their friends group, all these things. It's really, really important, right? Because otherwise you just alienate them and they won't even pay attention to you anymore, right? Take it slow. This is a very important topic. It's how we build our characters, our lives. Don't pretend you're going to fix this in a 30-minute conversation. Because guess what? You're not, if you're a parent. This is a lifelong, development opportunity for the both of you. Right? It's really, really important. Be cool about it. And I'm not saying be cool about it to just, in a demeaning way. No, by all means. It's okay. Right? Because guess what? God loves us. The exact way that we are. Exact way that we are. So be cool about it. Right? Because we're together on this. See, if you're my son, if you're my daughter, and we're going through this, guess what? There's a story behind. The movie analogy, right? There's a story behind that. We're continuing that story. So let's be cool about it. Right? In a way that also be interactive. Right? How do you think about this? What do you think about that? Should we do this? Make it in a two-way street, as opposed to you lecturing. Because guess what? We're not the experts. We're just not, right? We're just not. Be a resource. Son, daughter, I don't know this, but I know this guy that I work with. I know this guy that I go to school, whatever it is, right? Be resourceful. Oh, in the Spirit Center, Andre came to me and talked to me about homosexuality, transsexuality. Let me talk to him. Let me send him an email. I saw Roberto gave his email address. Let's email him and ask questions. All these things, guys. Resources. We have a lot of resources in our fingertips to be helpful, right? To be helpful. That's what it is. And last but not least, right? Think spiritually. Why do I say that? Because all of us are immortal beings, right? We're much more than this bunch of flesh here that you can see in this life, right? We have a past, we have a brilliant future ahead, right? And we are spiritual beings. So in this move analogy again, we don't know what we did in the last incarnation. We don't know what's going to happen to us in the future. What we know is based on this body of knowledge that we have in front of us, we have the tools and the tool set to, guess what? Find happiness. We do. We really do. Right? So going back to Leela, right? This is the note that she gave before she unfortunately committed suicide. Right? The only way I will rest in peace is if one day transgender people aren't treated the way I was. They're treated like humans with valid feelings and human rights. Gender needs to be taught about in schools. The earlier, the better. my death needs to mean something. There's some statistics about suicide. It's a huge epidemic, right, in our society today. It's even worse in the trans community. We see that. It's there. It's data. So my call to action for you, given that we have this tool set of Spiritism, is that Lilo's agenda should be our agenda. All of our agendas. And allow me to go back to Martin Luther King, Dr. King. The main way he was able to be successful is when he transitioned from rights for black people, which were due, of course due. He moved away from it, or bigger things, in a way that it's right for poor people. It's right for the oppressed. Abraham Joshua Heschel, the rabbi, marched alongside with him because Jewish people were also prosecuted, were also prejudiced. So it is up to us, cisgender, heterosexual people, to drive this agenda as well. Because if we don't help, guys, it's going to be a much harder journey for our brothers and sisters. With that in mind, I'd like to be a little more aggressive and be a little more, and show a video for you guys. I hope you can hear it.
I found out through a friend calling me before I left for work one night, and I couldn't believe it was true. Right there. It was in the basement.
I know there was a great deal of shaming that went on. The type of behaviors that go on are mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually abusive.
So that keeps the kids from coming out of their room. So they're basically stuck in their room and can't get out.
She was an incredibly talented artist. She had a case on her phone that was like a little Game Boy, and I commented on it, and we just picked up from there.
People aren't aware when they drive by. It's not a reminder, it's a moment of discovery.
Turn the camera off, please.
The advice in the world on Cincinnati, the Cincinnati trans community, that was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of stress. It was a lot of fear, worry.
The transgender community's attitude towards conversion therapy for many years has been that it's a thing in the past, it is not therapy, and it certainly doesn't convert anybody. If anything, it is psychological, damaging, and harmful to its subjects.
So that Chris was her best friend and neighbor. So my ask for you is, in the name of Christ, the Christ that we learn from Spiritism is the Christ that loves every single one. Is the Christ that sees we have a huge potential in everyone, every single one of us. So if you are a Christ follower, use his footsteps in a way to help all of those who are in need. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanking all the benefactor spirits, the guardian angels of every single one of us here. I wish you, from the bottom of my heart, a lot of happiness and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Flavio, for lifting our spirits. Thank you so much for that. So touching. We have now our friend Suzana Simoes. And do you have a PowerPoint? Yes, you do. I need to have access to it. Put it here. So we're going to do that. Marcelo, do we have her PowerPoint? There it is. Look at the technology. They're dropped right over. It's being downloaded as we speak. And since Flavio mentioned about Lila's struggle, which is so powerful, this book by Andre also has many testimonials of people who endured a lot of discrimination and prejudice and their journey towards finding themselves in spirituality and society. So it's very beautiful, and it's for sale back there. Jimmy is here, right? So without further ado, let's invite our friend Suzana to the stage, and after Suzana's lecture, we're going to have our panel with Suzana and Flavio for Q&A. I'm going to open on Keynote because it's better. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello? Yeah. So first of all, it's always very emotional to be partaking in this seminar that is very, very dear to my heart. And it's a difficult seminar to do, a difficult conference. And in recognizing that, I would like to thank from the bottom of my heart the Enlightenment Spirits Society of here, this group that has opened its doors to promote this event in New York. Because I will tell you, that is not every center or every place that has the capacity to embrace this proposal. And I'm very moved by Flavio's lecture, so I'm trying to recover from it. But we're going to talk about this topic, dictatorship of gender. Marlon said that his lecture was the most difficult one, and that's his idea, which I profoundly respect, but disagree. And so I'm going to start mine with a disclaimer. This is not a political talk. The views of this presentation do not reflect any political party in the US or abroad. They reflect the current psychological knowledge around gender and the views of immortality. The author, myself, is not a psychologist and therefore is open to corrections and suggestions related to any possible misunderstanding of the psychological aspects. In fact, I just published on Facebook one of the many conversations that I had with my partner, Sherry, who is actually the psychologist, from about 6 to 6:30 every morning for a number of weeks in order to get a hold of the terminology. And our conversation would go like this. I would review with her my lecture, and I would say, at this point I want to talk about this, and she would look at me and she said, but you're not using the words correctly. And I'm like, okay, so let me try again. And so we actually had many conversations. I published a little piece of one of these conversations on Facebook. You can see that. But I want to mention this to say that this is very difficult for me because, for two reasons. Because I have gender bias, and we all do. We all do. And so realizing my own gender bias is difficult, but necessary, because that's the only way we can transcend it. But also, just getting the right understanding in order to deliver it the best way possible, it was a preoccupation of mine. But let's go, because this topic, it's important to me, to the extent that although I have my own gender bias, I have had my share of struggles in life because of gender bias. And one of the reasons why I also put the disclaimer is because when we launched the title of the talk, The Dictatorship of Gender, we got a few phone calls from people who are like, you know, what do you mean by that? What are you going to talk about? You know, people are like fearful of what I would be here talking about. But I'm going to start by bringing this picture that's actually, it was published by a student of mine on Facebook. She is pregnant right now, and she posted this picture, and she actually promoted a live party on Facebook to disclose the gender of the baby, which I thought was, wow, times are very different indeed, right? So live party, and it was a major party on Facebook. But what is so confusing about this picture? Because it says, baby, la la la, gender reveal. So, what is so confusing? Gender is confusing. Gender, sex, what is to be revealed at this party, right? So what is to be revealed at the party? Is it a party to reveal the gender, or is it a party to reveal the sex of the baby, right? The biological sex. When we know that it's a boy, we have some gender expectations. We know the sex might be biologically a boy or a girl, but we actually don't know the gender of that baby. And that's where the challenges start. And because this is very complex, we're going to start by going back to the beginning and reviewing also some definitions that are important for us to understand. So, sex, Roberto addressed that earlier today, the explanation of sex, biological sex, being a male or a female. That alone is also a complex discussion, because it's actually not as simple as it looks. Because in the definition of sex, there are hormones, there are chromosomes, and so it's more complex than just saying it's a male or female or intersex. But that's not the scope of our presentation. So let's look at the concept of gender. So when she said, you know, what is the gender of the child? Was that particular person referring to what we have here? Refers to the psychological, social, cultural experiences and characteristics associated with the social statuses of a girl and women or boys and men. It includes assumptions, social beliefs, norms, and stereotypes about behavior, cognitions, and emotions of males and females. So that's the definition, which is a lot more complex than what we like to think. So I put in color those three different aspects that we're going to talk about briefly. So the first one is the psychological aspect. So the psychological aspect is how one identifies himself or herself, right? So it's your inner experience. So when we're talking about the psychological aspect of gender, we are talking about how you interpret yourself, how you identify yourself, your essence. Is the aspect of gender that comes from within. And from this perspective, I will say is the true aspect of gender, which for us as spiritualists, we have a great, great advantage in understanding, because we are immortalists. And we believe, so I hear, in reincarnation, which means that we have had many, many lives in different bodies, with different sex, but not only that, we were born in different times in different circumstances, in different societies, in different cultures. So our identity today is not only the result of the biological sex, the body, the garment that we were given at that particular incarnation, but also the social and cultural experiences that we internalize at that time. So our gender, how we identify ourselves psychologically, spiritually, in essence, is the sum of all these experiences. That's also not simple. It's a complex. And it's going to be what? It's going to be very unique to the experiences of each individual. It's personal. Gender identity, it's personal. But there's more to gender, as we can see in this definition. There's also the social and the cultural aspect. So when we look at the social aspect, we're looking at an aspect that is very powerful in our society. Because gender, our lives, our social interactions, they are structured around gender. Gender tells us about who someone else is and also how I should relate to that person. So one of the most disturbing experiences can be to see someone and not be able to tell whether that person is a guy or a girl. I don't know if that has ever happened to you, but I remember many times looking, and then you feel that sense of inner discomfort, and then a sense of like, I gotta find out. I have to find out. And then you keep looking, and you keep analyzing, and you keep trying to figure out. It's almost like, if you don't figure that out, the world's gonna fall apart, or something very serious is gonna happen. We must know. Is it a boy or is it a girl? So gender, in that sense, really organizes our relations in the way that we relate to one another. And then we have the cultural aspects of gender, which we need to realize they change, and they change drastically, and they change in time, but they also change within cultures. So if you go, for example, to Indonesia, they have 5 different types of gender. And there is one gender in particular that is considered a transcendental gender that encompasses all genders, so to speak. If we look at Nigeria, for instance, before the time of colonialism in Nigeria, gender was not existent in a society. In other words, it had no weight in that society. The society was organized and structured around other values, but not around gender in the way that our societies are. But even more interesting in the cultural aspect of gender is what we call gender expression. So gender expression is how we express our genders, right? So it is basically the thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, how we dress, how we relate, certain behaviors that are expected from us. All these defines gender expression. And so just to give you a little bit of a history in gender that's very, very interesting. In the 1980s in France, there is an infants magazine that the manufacturer wrote a note about the issue of gender. This is 1918. And the note says, there has been a great diversity over the subject of gender, but the generally accepted rule is that pink is for boys and blue is for girls. And he goes on by saying, the reason why is that pink is a more decided and stronger color and more suitable for boys, whereas blue is more delicate, is prettier, and then it's more suitable for girls. When did the shift took place, right? at some point, but culturally speaking, pink was a great color for boys. Now, in the 16th century in France, for example, men was common for men to wear ruffles, have long curly hair. That was the norm. But more surprising than that, high heels, believe it or not, were considered a distinctly masculine type of shoe. When did that change? Because I would like to review this rule. I think every, 100 years we should shift back and forth so that we could share more equally the pain, right? But so, what does that tell us? It's funny, but what does that tell us? That outside of the psychological aspect of gender, everything else is what? Material. The social constructs, the cultural constructs, they're constructs of a time that relate to the material world so much so that they change. What does not change is, it changes in the sense that it evolves because it adds experiences, is our inner self, it's the psyche, right? So that's the first distinction that I want to make clear in the concept of gender. And one place where you can look at Andre's new book about transgender has this very nice chart that helps us to understand these concepts very nicely. And I put right there, Andre Moreira, with permission, he allowed me to publish, put here on my slide, the picture from his book. So it's a really nice chart when you want to explain to someone the difference between what you would call biological sex, gender expression, gender identity. And what this also shows us is that under this concept, the concept of immortality, gender identity is a non-binary concept. And this is very important because we tend, up to these days, to think in binary terms. And everything that is outside of the binary, a lot of times, challenges us. In the same way, gender expression is no longer your Barbie and your Thor. I know, that's what came to my mind right now. Right? There is a multitude of expressions in between these two extremes. They're also accepted. Because we are immortal beings with unique and distinct experiences. So that is in line with the spiritist paradigm or the paradigm of immortality. Okay. But we do live still very much these paradigms of masculinity ideology and feminine ideology. And what we tend to do is, or the binary, and so what we tend to do, we tend to assign to people, depending on the sex, the biological sex, certain characteristics and certain qualities that we expect them to have. And this is the same thing to think. If you were born with yellow eyes, you should have these certain characteristics. And if you were born with purple eyes, you should have these other characteristics. And if by any chance you fall outside of these little boxes here, right, then there is something either pathological or immoral about you. And that still permeates this concept, this idea, this feeling permeates our society, right? So this, it's all research, it's not me talking. The research is cited over there. So masculinity ideology, you are a man. If you are anti-femininity, right? Anything, any trait of feminism, right? Because to be a female, we're gonna talk about that, we're gonna get to the female part, it's inferior. We still think that, we still believe that, we still live that. It's still present in our society in so many ways, although we have made significant progress, right? But there is still a very strong association with women being less worthy. So achievement, skew of the appearance of weakness, advantage, risk-take, stoicism, competitiveness, assertiveness, ambitious, confidence, more holy. men are more holy than women. Roberto, I think, talk about this too, right? This Eve, you know, this sinner, this impure woman who seduced the man and who is responsible for all the calamities that happens afterwards. Well, that is still ingrained in our psychics. And so men are more holy. So in many, many religions, women are unable to reach the more holy positions, right? They still belong only to men. Only men can be the leaders of certain religions. For that reason, because men are more holy than women in general. And for women, what do we expect? Nurturance, passivity, helplessness, preoccupation with appearance, more carnal in the sense of we are the dirty ones, right? And less holy. So those are the ideologies that are commonly assigned to these genders. Very good. Let me see. Okay, so moving forward, I want to ask you to take a quick look at these two next slides. I'm going to leave them for like a couple seconds so you guys can look at it. This is the first one. And this is the second one. So, when we look at these pictures, and let me go back to this one here, I would like to ask you, is Serena less of a woman than Giselle? No. Who knows, right? For some people we may, because, you know, is women really supposed to have that much muscle mass in their bodies, right? A lot of people would look at her and say, oh, look like a man, and then becomes less woman in their perception. Is Diane Keaton less a woman than Gisele because she likes to wear masculine clothes from time to time? Is Julia Roberts' identity, filial identity, jeopardized by the tie she's wearing? For that matter, is mine. Because if she can wear, so can I, right? I'll talk about that later. Right? So, what is, you know, and we can go even further. We can, you know, ask the same questions about these guys, Caetano Veloso, more or less of a man than Sylvester Stallone or Brad Pitt. And then we can also, you know, ask ourselves, these guys, do they all identify as men? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? Do they identify as fluid? Maybe they identify completely outside of the binary. So we cannot tell, right? Because we see different gender expressions. But we don't know gender expression is different than gender identity. We don't know how they identify. We can only tell how gender is being expressed differently in a continuum. As far as I know, they all cisgender, right? So they all identify with their biological sex, but the gender expression is very different. And I think we have made progress in terms of recognizing and accepting that to some extent. We'll get to that. But for some of us, in looking at this picture, we may feel some discomfort with some of those expressions. And so it's important that we talk a little bit about gender bias that we all have. So it refers to the beliefs and attitudes that involve stereotypes and preconceived ideas about roles, abilities, and characteristics of males and females that may contain significant distortions and inaccuracies. Gender bias. It's a concept that I think we all understand. But there's also something called gender role socialization. And what is that? It refers to the process through which children learn culturally prescribed behaviors, which most often reinforces gender stereotypes. So we have our psychology, what we bring as immortal beings, and then we have the stuff that is taught to us, not from the moment we are born. It starts before that. Before that. And we not only learn that, we grow up believing that those concepts are truth. And many times, if we find anything within us that divert from what we have told to be the truth, we either get depressed or we do what Mahmoud was talking about. I think it was Mahmoud. We split that part from us and put into our unconscious. And we're going to talk about this phenomenon in a little bit more. But so gender is something that starts, gender identity development begins before birth, shaped by the expectations that parents and other significant adults have for how a baby, how a boy or a girl should be treated, and how he or she should behave. So it's a boy. Folks, it's a boy. The baby's a boy. At the party we found out the baby's a boy. What comes to your mind? What should we do immediately? Buy a baseball cap. Right. A truck. Right? Or go running, get the first blue clothing for that little boy. Yeah, onesie. A blue one. Because now we know it is a boy. So it starts from the very beginning. And then when the baby, the way you're going to talk to the baby in the womb. Hello, boy. Daddy's here waiting for you. We're going to play some football when you come out of there. Hello, my princess. I hope you're doing well in there. Mama is getting your pink room ready for when you come out. We talk differently, with different tones of voice. And I'll tell you what, in putting this lecture together, I realized how I speak differently to my boy and to my girl. And I get emotional because I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why must I be harsher with him? Where does that come from? And in realizing that, I started to change little by little. I said, Jake, come here. I love you. Let me give you a hug. Put your head right here. Let me hold you tight. In treating him with more gentleness in my voice. Because why should I be less gentle with him? Because he's a tough boy. And then the baby's born. And we handle the babies differently. We hold the babies differently. We get that little boy, and as soon as he starts like opening his eyes, we're turning him upside down and holding him by the foot and throwing him up in the air. But the girl, God forbid, we're going to hold her tight and protect her because she's frail. It's a little girl. It's the princess. This is the power of gender, which has nothing to do with the spirit. You don't know. You don't know who that spirit is. You don't know where he or she has been, what experience he or she brings from the previous lives. But that's what we do. That's what we do. And I'm not here to say, oh, everything is wrong. No, I'm not saying everything is wrong. I'm just trying to work on the awareness of how limiting, and as we will see, harmful, these gender ideas taken in a very narrow perspective can be to the immortal being. So we have many male friends who have families and have children. Reminds me of the picture that Flavio showed us of the two guys with the 3 kids. And they will share with us very often this experience of being like, especially when the kids were little, and being at airports or public places, and people around would be looking, and this particular couple is very interesting because the guy is blonde and American, the other guy is dark hair and Jewish, and their boy is African American boy. So people would look at them and say, what is this? And most importantly, where is the mother? Where is the mother of this child? And here we start seeing the complexities and the difficulties, because if you think that two men are incapable of love, nurture, and affection, you are missing the immortal part. You are narrowing your vision because you know what? Femininity and masculinity, you call it if you want. I call all of these humanity. The spirit isn't this or that. The spirit is. The spirit is capable of every single one of these qualities, aptitudes. And we have been reincarnating. So those two guys are fully capable of love, nurtures, affection, as I am. Maybe more, because I think I had 1 million lives recently as a man. And I'm still developing this side of mine. So don't let the physical trick you. You don't know. So I am going to, bring it back, but I'm not going to read this because Roberto talked about it this morning very brilliantly, and so did Flavio, but we have to go back to these concepts. They both mentioned, right, about what I've been talking about it, that, in the spirit do not have sex. And I want to just mention the second paragraph here. As a reference, this is in the book Evolution of Two Worlds by Andrew Lewis, and it talks about something that we are not yet able to understand. Andrew Lewis speaks about that, and he says, I'm saying this, but I'm not going to get into this because I cannot speak about angels because I don't know how it functions. But what I want to say about this is it's cited there in the book that in the future, and it says in millenniums of years, when we become pure spirits, right? That's the final destination. For now, by all means, we need these physical distinctions because of the experiences that we have. But the goal, the ultimate goal, is that we are going to reach this place that he calls the angelical situation, in which the individual will have all the noble inheriting characteristics of femininity and masculinity reflecting in him herself, in the more advanced degrees of perfection, the glory of the Creator. I was coming here today in the metro area, and I was thinking about the song by Pepeu Gomes. Yeah, I know, I'm that old. And where he talks that to be a feminine man does not hurt his masculine side. If God is boy and girl, so am I. Right? And that is, I was like, wow, that came to my mind in the metro area, and I was like, that is that. That is what Andrew Lewis is telling us. Right? If God is boy and girl, so am I. So the challenge that we have with the issue of gender is that we are trying to fit the immortal into the narrow expectations of mortality. And we're telling people that this is how they need to fit, and if they don't fit, there is a problem. And a lot of times, like I mentioned before, we make this problem a problem of morality. So people, when we incarnate in these bodies and in this very, very, very narrow expectations they're placed upon the spirit, we experience what psychologists are going to call gender role restraints. which is defined as a psychological situation in which gender roles demands have negative consequences on the individual or others. The negative effect of gender roles strain are mental and physical for individuals and for relationships. So gender role restraints, and a lot of gender role conflict is going to take place. And gender role conflict is defined problems resulting from adherence to rigid, sexist, or restrictive gender roles learned during socialization that result in personal restriction, devaluation, or violation of others and of self. So these are two important concepts. So a lot of times it's very difficult for the spirit to conform again to these very narrow expectations related to gender, as if gender has dictates how one needs to be. And so for a lot of people, and I will share this to you, right? Something very personal. So I like wearing ties, right? Not a lot, once in a while. I think it's fun. It's fun. Actually, I find particularly sexy to mix male and female clothes. I love that. And my partner loves that too, so we're in accordance. But I recently went to do a conference in Brazil. And I was like, I'm gonna take my tie. I chose my outfit, and I put in my suitcase. And when I got to Brazil, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Why couldn't I do it? For two reasons. One, because I realized that in that moment it was more important for me to be liked and accepted than to wear my tie. Two, because my mother traveled with me. And I didn't want to hear talk in my ears. In fact, I didn't want to upset her because she gets very upset sometimes with these gender, differences. So up to this day, I mean, she's working on it. She's working on it. I'm happy, and we're working on it together, right? Now, another day, an artist, and I wish I could remember her name. Sherry sent me this little video. It was this week. Whose son loves to wear dresses. He's 5, 6 years old. He wants to be a designer. He already knows he wants to be a designer. He loves to draw dresses and he loves to wear them. And he goes to school and he wears the dresses. And the parents both, very cool. He loves dresses, let him wear the dresses. But then one day he stopped wearing the dresses because, the kids in school were giving him a hard time. But then suddenly he put the dress again and went to school. And the mother said, but did your friends stop giving you a hard time? He said, no, they continue to give me a hard time, but I love wearing dresses too much. And I was like, he's doing better than me. He's doing better than me. But this, put lightly, is what gender conflict and the expression, gender expression, the roles, feels like on a day-to-day, not being able to fully and freely express who you are because you're afraid on how people are gonna judge you, if you're gonna be accepted, if you're gonna be loved, if you're gonna belong, which is a very, very core human need. Everybody wants to belong. So the American Psychology Association did 40 years of research, and this has been published in 2 documents in 2018. Guidelines on how to treat men is one article, and the other one is the guidelines for women, which was initially published in 2007, and they did a review because of all the changes in women's role and published a new one now in 2018. But in the guidelines, they say that initially they thought that research have assumed that masculinity and femininity were opposite ends of a spectrum, and healthy psychology entailed identifying strongly with the gender roles confirmed by a biological sex. So for a long time, psychologists thought that for you to be mentally healthy, you needed to strongly associate with your biological sex. And that vision has changed, has evolved. The document states that traditional masculinity is psychologically harmful, and socializing boys to suppress their emotions cause damage that echoes both inwardly and outwardly. So what it's saying is this: when these masculine ideology is taken to the extreme with rigid ways, saying that men should not cry, that men should be always tough, right? That is absolutely extremely harmful to men's psychology. And we're going to see in which ways. So it says that men with very, very strong beliefs about masculinity, they're less likely to seek for health care, because men don't get sick, right? And getting sick and going to doctors and need help and needing someone to assist, that's for women. It's for weak people. So they're more likely to take normal risk health behaviors, and these are, it's super fun, it's such as heavy drinking and avoiding vegetables. So guys, please eat your vegetables. They are more negative about seeking mental health services. They're convinced that they need to be self-sufficient and able to take care of themselves, and anything outside of these norms need to be kept secretive. They experience isolation and believe not to be okay. And the level of depression among men is sky high, but many times it's not correctly identified by psychologists, because men is not going to express depression in the same ways of women. A lot of times they're angry. A lot of times they are being hostile and violent, but truly, they're suffering tremendously internally. They're unable to express that. So the ramifications of that is we see violence extremely high among men, either killing or killing themselves. The life expectancy to be much lower than women in general. And we have talked about, the rates of suicide, that, women attempt suicide, but men is way more successful in doing it. So those are the ramifications for men. How about women? So for women, we have sexism, right? We also mentioned this earlier today. And so women have to deal with these unrealistic and stereotypical media images of girls and women intersect in various ways with girls and women's vulnerabilities about self-esteem, eating disorders, depression, sexual development, general well-being, and feelings of belonging. Girls are pervasively exposed to messages that encourage an appearance-based appraisal of social worth. When you see a girl, what is the first thing you say? Oh, darling, how cute you are. Consistently.
That's true.
Right? Consistently. We don't say to the boys, oh, hey, how pretty you are. We don't say that. It's a difference. So that's the message that the girls get. They need to be pretty and conform to what the media is telling them, how they should be. And then we have sexual harassment, gender inequities in the workplace and affecting women's health in diverse ways. Other than sexism, we have devaluation and discrimination. So discriminatory practices in school, workplace, disparities of payment, disparity of promotion practices with women, barriers in religious institutions for more advanced positions. So all of those things are challenges that women experience, with also some ramifications, such as women experience great levels of depression, very high number of 10 times more likely, in fact, to have eating disorders than boys, and decreased self-esteem and sense of identity. They have done a research where they have a group of girls that were going to take a test and they divided in two groups. In one group, the girls just went ahead and took the test. And the other group, before they started the task, they had to answer if they were a boy or a girl. And so they were primed for gender. And so this group that actually checked that they were girls, they performed significantly lower than the other group who was not primed for gender prior to taking the test. What does that say? You're a girl, you're incapable. You're not supposed to be doing math. You know what I mean? This is for boys, right? So these are the messages that are in us, right? Not from this lifetime, but from many lifetimes where this has been what we're dealing with. So we have some ramifications, general ramifications in this case. Profound dehumanization, deep effects on self-esteem of males and females. This is in general. And deep effects on the sense of belonging. And I would like to talk a little bit about this dehumanization, right? What does that mean by dehumanization? So, with the concepts of femininity and masculinity, we are pretty much reducing the spirit to these compartmentalized possibilities. And so, when I tell that, you know, a man is incapable of loving and caring for a child in the same way a woman is, of course, there is biological differences. We talk about delivering a baby, but this is different. We're talking about something else. The ability to care for, right? So if we tell that a man, if we believe that a man is incapable of that, we are dehumanizing. Because the spirit, again, the spirit just is. Just is. The spirit is capable of absolutely all these qualities in all these films. And that is, as I have mentioned, our final destination. So anytime that we look at someone and think that they are incapable of having certain expression, a certain quality, we are dehumanizing that person. We have made some progress, and I would like to share with you some things that we see nowadays in the media. Right? So there's now a campaign called Real Men, Real Depression. It's okay, right? To be depressed. Men do have feelings, men do cry. So there are actually campaigns to tell men that yes, they are entitled to be depressed. It's okay. They're not less men because of that, right? There is the Institute of Child Psychology. I love this. Boys will be, not boys, but respectful and responsible for their actions. Boys cry, and that's okay. Act like a human. Be kind and be yourself. So these are being taught to children. So the message is, we're moving forward. There is some hope. And what we can do, like Flavio was talking, is we need to work on our own biases. We all have them, you know? And so recognizing where is the bias, right? Why do I feel like that? And I'll give you a hint. I mentioned this in one of the other seminars that we did. But this is a guy, a neighbor of mine in Miami Shores, who opened a group of men to talk about men's vulnerability. So it's a group of guys who get together. We all have our own struggles and need for support. Find the courage to be vulnerable and ask for help when you are struggling. Have the courage to reach out and support someone in need. Be courageous. Join the conversation. So guys that sit together to share with one another their vulnerabilities, which women are much more likely to do with one another. The funny thing about this is that the group is called Whiskey Six. So they sit together and drink whiskey. So what they do is they share their vulnerabilities, and right there they numb it. So we need to send a psychologist to the group to help them, once they share the vulnerabilities, to process it, right? that is where the strength really lies. The courage to talk about it and the courage to bear it. And in bearing it, feeling the human within you, right? The spirit. So that is really the courage and the strength. And then this is very recent from the Herald, Miami Herald newspaper. This article that talks about the evolution of fatherhood shines light on a true partnership. And she's gonna say here, today dads, at least the ones I know, don't fit well into what for decades had been considered men's traditional duties at home. They now change diapers, take their children to the doctor, assist in homework, ferry them to extracurricular activities, all while holding down full-time jobs. So there's more room for men to express, to live, and to enjoy this side that has been for so long told them it was not okay. It was the woman's role, and they should stay out of it. And wrapping up, we have a lot of challenges still, although we have progress, some challenges remain, right? So gender continues to be very closely monitored in policing in our society, and a lot of times exercised coercively, right? And for a lot of people, these gender norms continue to be experienced as truth. And anyone who diverges from that can be many times on the other side of hostility, discrimination, and unacceptance. So, quick exercise. How much femininity can appear in a man before it is too much, before he becomes unintelligible to us as a man? This is a question done by Ken Corbett, which is actually a psychologist here in New York. He asked that. So let's see. You see a guy, right? And you understand that guy as a man, right? At which point he becomes unintelligible as a man to you. He crosses the line. It's too much. I can't take this, right? So is it if he shaves his hairs, legs, chest, arms? Is it if he wears tight pants, or has long hair, or cross the legs like a woman, or wears pink shirts, or wears earrings, or have the nails painted? Where do you cross the line and say, no, that's enough? Because maybe there is a line still for all of us. And so each one knows, where do you draw your line? What becomes unacceptable? That you can no longer understand that person as a man, right? How much can we take until the discomfort is so huge that we must devalue, hurt, or kill another human being? Because maybe you are unable to kill someone, but we can kill with words. We can kill with our attitude. We can kill with despise. But sometimes it becomes so much, and we get to the phenomenon called otherizing. So we are all holy beings, right? But for some of us, it's very challenging because society said to be a man, you should be this way. And if you identify anything that is outside of that truth, you cannot deal with that. You split that within you and put on your unconscious. Then comes someone else, another person. That other person comes in front of you. It's a man with the nails painted. It's a man with traits or something that bothers the hell out of you. Thank God it's not in me. It's there. It's the other. It's called the otherizing feeling. It's when we identify in others something that we have repressed within ourselves, and we hate so much that we want to kill that person because he's putting in our face the feminine that we cannot withstand within ourselves. I asked Sherry, explain to me why people kill. Why are they so bothered that they need to kill another human being? Why is that? And so before we judge the one who kills, let's see our own killing instincts. Because we need to change the world by starting with ourselves, by understanding, by embracing everything that we are, and understanding that every single expression of who you are is holy. It needs to be loved, it needs to be embraced, it needs to be expressed. Because there is freedom, there is peace, and there is harmony in the ability to be who you truly are.
Jesus.
Too much energy coming from me. The flowers couldn't take it.
It was like, oh. I think you catch elevated.
So, moving forward, I skipped a few slides, but I want to leave you guys with this. Some people are just plain more genderly than others, and this is okay. I like the idea of thinking about gender as something like color saturation. There are people who have high saturated genders, and for other people it has a milder kind of valence. There is a lot of variation. I'd also call up an idea I'm fond of: gender is a necessary fiction. The crucial thing about these categories is to hold them very lightly. In the theoretical sense, within a model in which gender categories can be a matter of life or death for some, and fluid and variable and transformable for others. So looking at gender as a color saturation, I love that idea. Support the positive. So, not everything is negative. Again,
take this off. It's enough.
Just leave the plants over there. Now you can see me better. I need your full attention. So, not everything to be tough. For men to be tough, there are times where it's okay to be tough. So it's not about, everything being negative. So there are times on everyone's life when there is a need to be able to power through. But you only do that, and you believe that if you do not do that, then you are somehow less worthy as a person. There is a problem. It is important to discard the harmful ideologies of traditional gender roles and find flexibility in the potentially positive aspects. Okay? So that's the recommendation. And focus on the spirit, right? I like the idea of taking a second and looking at the person next to you. Are you able to look at that person? Look at the person next to you. Can you see beyond the physical body? Can you look at that person and really, really think that next to you there is an immortal spirit? And embrace that spirit with all that he or she is. That's the exercise. What do we do when we live here? We practice to live as immortal beings. We practice to look at each other. I don't see your pants. I don't see your clothes. I don't see your tie. I hear you. I hear what you say. I can feel your heart. I can hear your ideas. I can hear your values. I can feel your energy. And for the spirit you are, I honor you and I love you. And that's, my dear friends, how we need to approach the world and every single person, especially the ones that challenge us the most. Because if you embrace those who challenge you the most, you embrace yourself first as a holy being that you are. My final thoughts, my first thoughts, my thoughts of every day. I would like to thank these two spirits who have joined my family and who teach me every day about spirit, about immortality, about respect, about giving him the pink jacket that he wanted so much, and he was so happy the day that he bought it. And the day that he asked me to put one earring, I said, Jakey, they're going to make fun of you in school. He said, I want it. And he went to school. And then a few months later, he came back, Mom, I want the second earring. Are you sure? Yes. And today he says, my earrings make me a very popular boy in school. I'm like, that's awesome, right? Or that little one, with all that she teaches me about immortality and love. But above all, this one, who is everything in my life, and who is the one who sat with me, who teaches me. She teaches me so much. She's so much better. She knows so much more than I know. She makes me a better person. And she loves me by who I am, without ever, ever, ever. Sometimes I tell her, should I keep my hair short or long? Whatever you want, sweetie. Right? And then, so, to these three spirits, my gratitude, and to all of you, thank you very much.
Gave us a lot to think about. So why don't we do that over some coffee and a coffee break? Stretch our legs, and we'll be here in
10 minutes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes break. Thank you.